Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. And as you can see from the title and thumbnail of today's video, today we're going to talk about why men are leaving the church. But before we get into that, there's just one little thing I want to point out to you. You may have noticed in the description box below, there is now a link to buy the CD version of my brand new Christian metal album, Faith in the Furnace. This is a brand new album that I made with a completely different music AI than my original album, Citizens of Heaven. You can find Citizens of Heaven on the TTOR website, but you don't have any CDs of it and it's not on any music platforms. Faith in the Furnace, however, has a CD available for purchase, which you can see on the screen. If you go to the link, you'll go to this page, and you can buy one of my CDs for $9.99, and it's a great metal album. So if you're into Christian metal, and you're especially looking for a Christian metal album that's extremely hardcore and compares favorably well to basically every Christian metal band that exists today, well, then I would encourage you to get Faith in the Furnace today with the link to the page where you can get the CD in the description box below. But you can also go to my website if you want to find out more info about Faith in the Furnace. That being said, let's get into today's video. Let's look at this, a Pew Research document from September 13th, 2022, titled Modeling the Future of Religion in America. If recent trends in religious switching continue, Christians could make up less than half of the U.S. population within a few decades. Now, on page 25 of this document, there's a section titled Education, Politics, and Geography Tied to Differences in Religious Switching. And when you go to the section that says gender, it says, Americans who have moved away from Christianity are more likely to be men, while women are more likely to retain their Christian identity. A slight majority of U.S. adults who were raised Christian and are now unaffiliated, 54%, are male. Among people who have remained Christian, 57% are women. So, 54% of Christians who leave the faith, deconvert, and convert to some other religion, like atheism or whatever, 54% of those people are males. So males are the biggest demographic when it comes to who is leaving the Christian religion. We have to answer the question, why is it that the majority of people who leave the faith are men? Now, it could be that they get converted to another worldview like Islam or atheism or Hinduism or whatever. And it's also possible that they get sucked into leftist politics, which we can see at the bottom of the page in the section called Politics, which says, 7 in 10 adults who were raised Christian but are now unaffiliated are Democrats or Democrat-leaning independents compared to 43% of those who remain Christian and 51% of U.S. adults overall. Some scholars argue that disaffiliation from Christianity is driven by an association between Christianity and political conservatism that has intensified in recent decades. So in other words, politics is a factor in that because, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, conservative politics lines up a lot closer with biblical Christianity than liberal politics do. So there is an association there that exists in terms of values. And so if you get sucked into the leftist Democrat way of thinking, you're going to leave the Christian faith and become some kind of leftist politically. That's what the odds say. But get beyond converting to other religions like atheism, get beyond politics. Why else would men leave the Christian faith more than women? Why? Well, if you understand Christian culture like I do after living on this earth for 35 years, you know that Christian culture, now I'm not talking about the Christian faith, I'm not talking about what the Bible says, I'm talking about Christian culture, the culture that is created and maintained and carried out by Christian adherents, Christian men, Christian women. Christian culture, as sucky as it is overall, can be especially sucky in their treatment of men. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, there is a recent YouTube video that came out by Effective Purpose titled Exposing How Churches Ignore and Protect Women's Sin and What It's Cost Us. Now, on the screen, I have it paused at the 34-minute, 38-second mark of this 50-minute video. And what happens in this first two-thirds of the video is that Effective Purpose looks at clips from 3 different sermons by 3 different pastors who are directly addressing men and women. And so he keeps score as he looks at these clips. He keeps count of how many times men are spoken to or about in a positive way. He keeps count of how many times men are spoken to or about in a negative way. He keeps count of how many times women are spoken to or about in a positive way. And he keeps count of how many times women are spoken to or about in a negative way. And what you see on screen is the last time he updates his scorecard in the video. He doesn't bring up the scorecard for the rest of the video. So I want to show you this scorecard, which you can see right here on the screen. And we can see that according to this, the treatment of men and the treatment of women when being spoken to or about is very different when it comes to being preached to from the pulpit. As you can see on the women's side, women were spoken to mostly positively. But even when you look at the times they were spoken about in a negative way, most of the time those negative spoken abouts were basically softballed. They either would deflect to themselves or deflect to men instantly to soften the blow to women. So most of the time, even when they spoke negatively about women, it was softened so that it wouldn't be as harsh and wouldn't offend their tender sensibilities. But when men were spoken to or about, it was always negative and never in a positive manner. As a matter of fact, as you can see from the scorecard, men were spoken to in a negative manner more than women were spoken to or about at all, whether it be positive or negative. The amount of times they spoke to or about women was fewer than the amount of times they spoke about men negatively, and men were never spoken about positively in any of the clips that Effective Purpose was looking at. Now, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is that the sample size is really small. He only looked at 3 different sermons by 3 different pastors. In order to assume that this trend that he found in these clips is an accurate representation of the broader trend of American Christianity when it comes to pastors speaking to or about men and women, you would have to look at a lot more sermons. But if we just go with the sample size that Effective Purpose presented in this video, and we look at the numbers of what he shows here on screen, if that pattern that we see in this video is true on a much larger scale in Christian culture among churches, that's really disturbing. You literally have a culture in Christianity where women are spoken to or about from the pulpit in a mostly positive manner, and even when it's a negative manner that they're spoken to or about, it's usually softened so that it doesn't have as much teeth to it and it's not as offensive to them. But when men are spoken to or about in the church from the pulpit, that's always in a negative manner, never in a positive manner. If this pattern that Effective Purpose documented in this video is the true pattern that we see among all churches across America, well then it's no wonder that men leave the church and sometimes even leave the Christian faith. Why would you want to go to a church environment where you are most likely going to be spoken about or to in a negative way and never positively? Meanwhile, women are spoken about mostly positively and rarely negatively, and even when they're spoken about negatively, they soften the blow so it doesn't come off with as much teeth or as harshly or as offensive. That's what's going on with broader Christian culture in churches across America. If what we're seeing on screen is the pattern that is mostly true about Christianity in general in America, no wonder men don't want anything to do with the Christian faith or want to be in a church at minimum. No wonder. But there's more to it than that, as I documented in a recent video titled "Mark Driscoll Thinks Men Without Wives or Kids Are Losers." People like Mark Driscoll, from the pulpit, have actually said that men in their late 20s to mid-30s who are childless and unmarried, those men, according to Mark Driscoll, are selfish and self-indulgent human beings who will vote for socialists from womb to the tomb, and they don't want to bear the responsibility that comes with raising a family. In other words, according to Mark Driscoll, if you are a male in your late 20s to mid-30s and you're unmarried and childless, you're a loser. And of course, if Christian women believe that, then when they look at Christian men who are in their late 20s to mid-30s, who are unmarried and childless, they're going to find them icky. They're going to think in their heads, well, there must be something wrong with them. They must be morally deficient, or they must be a loser in some kind of way if they're still unmarried at this point in their lives. There's also people like Paul Washer who in the past, about 10 years ago, were teaching Christian men that if you didn't have your own place, you didn't have your own car, you didn't have a good job that financed everything you were doing, you weren't paying your own insurance, that basically you were not eligible to date or marry a Christian woman regardless of your maturity in your Christian faith. It didn't matter how godly of a person you were, how good of a Christian you were, if you didn't have those material things going for you all at the same time, according to Paul Washer 10 years ago, well, you're not worthy of dating a Christian woman or marrying one. Now, I do have a much deeper deep dive into Paul Washer that I have planned for the near future, because Paul Washer has actually affected me in a negative way, and he did so about 10 years ago, back when I was in a much lower place in my life than I am now in terms of my finances, in terms of my living situation, my job situation, etc. So that's coming in the future, but the point remains the same. Men are treated horribly in the church. When spoken to from the pulpit, it's mostly in a negative way or entirely in a negative way. And when they speak to women, it's mostly positive, and even the negative stuff they say to women, well, it's actually softened so that it's not as offensive to them. Women are treated much more gracefully, and they're treated much better than men in churches, especially when pastors speak to men and women from the pulpit. And then, of course, you have the pastors like Paul Washer and Mark Driscoll, who teach that if you are unmarried and childless by your late 20s to mid-30s, and you don't have your own place, and you don't have your own car, and you don't have a good job that finances everything, and you aren't paying your own insurance, well, then you're not worth dating a Christian woman. Even though to get all those things going for you at the same time, it takes most men a good chunk of their lives. Usually they aren't reaching this point where they have all these things going for them at the same time until their 30s, and sometimes even their 40s. I'm one of those people. I'm just now starting to get to that point where I meet the standards that Paul Washer 10 years ago said that a Christian man needed to be at in order to be worthy of dating a Christian woman. Hopefully you got something out of this video, and if you are a man watching this video, especially if you're a Christian man, and you're in your 20s and you don't have your own place, your own car, or you don't have a good job that can finance all those kind of things, and you don't pay for your own insurance yet, and you're thinking to yourselves, wow, I must be some kind of loser. If that's the standard that women in the faith are going to hold for men being eligible to marry them, well then I'm going to be an old man by the time I have all those things going for me. If you find yourself in that position, like I did 10 years ago, I want you to know you are not a loser. You are not a lost cause. Your faith in Christ matters. You are stronger than you think you are. You are more creative than you think you are. You are more skilled than you think you are. If you just put your nose to the grindstone and you get everything out of yourself that you can, you will surprise yourself with where you can eventually get in life. It might take you until your 30s, like me, to get to the point where you have your own place, your own car, and you have the kind of job that you want that makes the kind of money that you want in order to be able to do the things that you want to do. Might take some time to get to that point if you're in that situation, but I want you to know you can get there. I was in your shoes. I understand how that feels. And it took me until earlier this year to get to that point, but it was worth it. I had to go through a lot of pain, trial, and error in relationships with women in order to get to this point, but I'm at where I'm at now, and I like where I'm at in terms of the position that my life is in. And I just want you guys to know there is hope for you. You are not alone in dealing with these problems, and I just want you to know that I am here for you. If you're watching this video and you have experiences related to the things I discussed in this video, please share your stories in the comments section down below. I want to hear about it. I want to read it. I want to be able to interact with you and see what's going on with you guys in your personal lives, because the deteriorating relationships between men and women, generally speaking, is a real problem. And it is something that needs to be addressed, especially in the Christian world, since I am a Christian. So please leave your feedback down below. I want to hear about your life stories regarding these topics. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Toodles!